Has a microphone.
Yo.
Hello everyone. So we're about to start the second panel of the day. I'm just going to maximize this slide so you can all read about it. But we are now having the panel on consumer use cases. So
Maybe we should sit in the
here we go. So I'd like to call the panelists to kind of take their seats on the stage. You can move them around if you want, but don't get too, don't get in front of the screen. We're going to have this panel be moderated by Alexander from Maven 11, or it's maybe Maven 11. Maven 11. Maven 11, I was right. We've got Dino, the founder of Fluent. We've got Matt from Arbitrum, the head of product. We've got Altan from Nuffle Labs. And we've got Liz Yang from Yang, which we corrected last minute on the slide deck, from Azuki. So great to have you all here talking about consumer use cases. Who am I giving the microphone to?
Oh, me, sorry.
There you go. Thank you very much for bearing with me. Okay, everyone. Welcome our panelists.
All right. First of all, thank you all for being here. Also, you guys for taking the time. Why is consumer use cases so important? I think we can maybe all agree or disagree. Very interested in hearing your opinions on this. We are at a stage where the industry is sort of shifting, right? I think over the last maybe 3 years, we've built out a lot of the infrastructure that was sorely needed. And some could argue that we are now at a stage where we can reach consumers who are not just crypto natives who really enjoy trying out everything, but we can actually reach people who are not familiar with crypto. And so I thought, because of the diversity here of the panel, everyone here is building pretty much something different, that we sort of focus on the consumers and we look at them. So first of all, I would like maybe you guys to just do a short intro of who you are and what you're building, and then maybe also jump into just a very short, who do you think is your consumer today, and who are you building it for the future? Who do you see your consumer being in the future? Maybe Liz, because you're in the corner there, if you can start, that'd be kind of nice. Right.
Sure. Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Liz. I'm the head of growth at Azuki. So most of you guys are probably familiar with Azuki as an NFT project, but we're actually so much more than that. We've partnered recently with one of the leading anime producers in Japan, so we've released an episode of our anime anthology series. I think something that is very interesting that is a big focus for us is how can we use emerging technology to be able to push boundaries in entertainment. So with our episode 1 of the anime anthology series, there was a moment where if you were watching the episode in the browser, and if you had specific NFTs within your wallet, you could actually see your Azuki in the background of the anime episode. And for me, all of these things that we do in Web 2 are so personalized, but despite all of the advancements in technology, the form factor of entertainment is still the same. Even though there's special effects in CGI, the way in which we consume content is pretty much exactly the same. So that's something that we've been quite interested in. And you were asking about, what was the second part of that question?
It's who is your consumer today? Are they crypto natives? Are they people who just don't know anything about crypto? Is there interaction this is a crypto project, or this is a cool anime project?
Okay, so I think that's a really interesting question. So at Azuki, we make actually quite a big distinction between the terms consumer and fan. So there's a leading cultural theorist called Henry Jenkins, and the difference between a consumer and a fan is as follows. So a fan will consume content over and over again. It's not just something you have in the background and you watch once. A fan will pick through content to try to find Easter eggs or hidden messages. A fan will congregate both online and in person to be able to form this kind of alternate utopian social group that is very different than how they interact in real life. And a fan will take IP and content and remix it and create their own. So the reason why I outline these distinctions is because these are things that we see within the Azuki community. So within the Azuki community, people are really, really passionate, and I think that's something that really differentiates NFT communities with DeFi communities, where I think with DeFi communities it's definitely very financially driven. And of course, our space is very hyper-financialized, so I'm not saying that's not a big part of our community and their raison d'etre for being a part of the Azuki ecosystem. but we have actually 100 sub-communities all around the world, so people who are regularly meeting up globally. We have people within our community that have commissioned, in aggregate, I think 10,000 works of fan art, which is like pretty crazy, whenever we drop anything. So there's something that we've dropped on our website, which is like an interactive aspect of our world. So there's a part of our website where if you go to, it depicts this part of our world called the Alley, which is kind of like a mix of Kowloon and Tokyo and so on and so forth. And it's really interesting. We had an Easter egg there where you had to use the dev tools in the browser to remove an SVG layer to reveal a hidden message, and people actually found it. So, our consumer today is definitely the Web3 audience, specifically our holders, but looking ahead, it's definitely the anime industry and anime fans writ large, and we've made significant headways there.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, we don't do that many cool stuff, but anyway, I'll start. I'm Altan, one of the founders of Nuffle. You guys might know us from the Modular Summit. We had like Nuffle waffles there, so people love those. We still keep those, which is quite fun. We build a Nuff protocol, which is an infrastructure that allows you to stake tokens from anywhere. So any L1, L2 to EigenLayer. So in that case, like consumers would be, I guess, people that come into MetaMask or anywhere that want to stake tokens that they are no longer using. It could be even exchanges, right? I know that Cardano is a meme, but still a lot of people hold Cardano, and you guys probably saw the price chart today. But essentially, you can stake those tokens to EigenLayer, where you have a larger marketplace beyond Ethereum itself. It could be any L1 or L2 tokens. And the other consumer side of this would be the AVSs. So AVSs would consume the security that these tokens provide. So those are, I would say, two categories of consumers that we deal with.
Maybe a quick follow-up question on that, because you also built the DA layer for Near. Like, do you also see sort of that offering as being like something you want to do in the future as well?
Yeah, so it's a very cheap place to store any data. Like we use it for blobs, which is great, but we also store sequences of the blockchains that we're going to talk to, so we can use that as a credible place. But candidly, like it's a problem that's been solved, so we're not too super interested in it to build more and more tools there. So we're quite excited about the market of like promises, but people would say, sure, I'm saying commitments, credible commitments is something that is larger than crypto itself. So we're quite excited to build there.
Cool, I'll go. Hey, I'm Matt. I run the product team at Offchain Labs, one of the initial developers of the Arbitrum protocol. I think the consumer that we would think about today, at least from my perspective, two buckets. We have teams building things. A lot of crypto native projects. I think Arbitrum has kind of really led the way in terms of bringing teams that want to build decentralized finance protocols. And now increasingly, you mentioned a shift in the market. I would say a lot more institutions are trying to look and try to, I would say, drive efficiency in the way that they settle transactions. I mean, we have great reports showing literally like 100 orders of magnitude in cost reduction. So the product market fit of what crypto was originally prophesized to be is in small part becoming true, I think, for a lot of those users. So teams, a lot of experimenters in the DeFi space and institutions. I would say users, probably mostly speculative traders, and a small portion of whales or people investing their money. That is what I would say is mostly crypto today anyway.
So I'm Dino, one of the co-founders of Fluent. Fluent is building the first blended execution layer. So you could just think of a blockchain that's, for expediency's sake, like SVM, EVM, and WASM like in one VM. And it lets you, very easily deploy anything that you would otherwise deploy on like Solana or SVM chains on a Fluent. Same thing with Ethereum or EVM chains, and same thing with kind of WASM-based languages and software libraries. You could just build with any of those as building blocks in one place, and they all kind of work seamlessly together. So as far as consumers, I would definitely, to kind of similar answer to you, there's like different buckets because we are infrastructure, like we are a chain. So like, the way, when you say consumers of our product, I think about developers, and so I'll just talk to that really quickly, but then I will touch on like end users. Our developers, I would probably say, kind of like fit two characteristics, and they're definitely, well, I guess three. They're crypto native right now. They like use multiple different programming languages, or know multiple different programming languages. In this case, we support Solidity and Rust to start. And third, they value, using the best tool for different parts of their application. So they would see certain parts to use Solidity for and certain parts to use Rust for, even if it's just pulling in some Rust libraries to enhance an app. That's the crypto native side that we see today of our developers. I think it's pretty, like, those characteristics I think are pretty representative of like a lot of other developers in the world. So I definitely see that like mapping nicely to less crypto native developers, but we'll see over time. As far as users, I probably just have a similar answer to you guys, honestly, or to you, honestly. Like, it's, there's a lot of...
Maybe on this, because both of you are building similar products.
Yeah.
I mean, commoditization of block space is a thing, right? Like, I mean, the competition in the L2 space, even the L1 space, is picking up. Like, but obviously, Arbitrum and obviously you guys as well, like, you have an interest in keeping apps in your chain, users interacting in your chain. Like, how do you see, like, how do you think about this problem? Like, how do we maintain our user base, and maybe how do we grow it in this competitive landscape?
Yeah, I can go. It's a really hard question. I would say that's the job. That's what we do, or at least me personally. I think about it, before I moved into the industry, there was one of the senior leaders at Google where I used to work. I actually forget the guy's name. But he said that in 10 years, he viewed, GCP, their job, as selling block space. So I think, this trend of the commoditization of block space, right, like permissionless data storage and being able to verify things is really a premise and a property that a lot of people are starting to value. I mean, you look at the state of the world today, we're starting to want sovereignty over everything that we thought we owned and realized we didn't have no power over. So I think probably the critical thing here for us is allowing developers to do new things. I mentioned there's these two buckets, right? Developers and users. Developers are the main focus for us, right? We don't need to necessarily optimize the Nitro stack or the protocol technology that we ship for users at the end layer, because at the end of the day, applications are going to build the experiences like what you guys are doing that users end up wanting to use. Like, I would say most people are going to an app, not going to a blockchain, although we could talk about speculative traders another day. So I would say the most important thing is to talk to people, right? Understand what are the problems that you're dealing with. I would say in terms of just, and then I'll shut up. The kind of fragmentation of block space is the main challenge we're seeing today. One of the unique properties of Orbit, or at least the kind of blockchain deployment tool that we build, is that you have full control and full sovereignty over how you want to customize that, right? You don't have to make sacrifices to join a group. You can just launch a chain and retain properties and liquidity and interoperability with all the chains in that ecosystem. And so there's starting to become different, I would say, like SKUs or archetypes of these deployments, and making sure that they can all work nicely with each other while still continuing to scale. That's the biggest challenge, and that's how we kind of think about maintaining that user base.
Are you saying there was a question around commoditization of block space as it relates to retaining devs as our audience, or?
I mean both. I mean, if you think about it, Base is extremely successful also for developers. They want to deploy in Base because basically everyone has a Coinbase wallet. It's like it's an entry point. Like, how do you make sure that you compete against that? Like, how do you make sure that you're attracting both the builders and the founders to come and build at Fluent without losing out to Base? Or
I think for us, we have to be like, it's hard, but we have to be like intensely focused on like that developer segment. Like, we need to, I think it's really important, just with like a startup lens hat on, to hyper focus on like who like the beachhead initial target audience is. And for us, like, it is a cohort of people who just genuinely value being able to kind of use different who really feel that they're like different tools are best for different tasks. And I think that there's like a lot of developers who know that coming into crypto and then just get sucked into EVM land or sucked into SVM land. But if it was like them programming in their outside of crypto, they would think about it that way, of just like, okay, let me pull something over here, pull something over there, see value in like, millions of software libraries that, you can't get access to in the EVM. So like, I don't think it's the kind of thing where like, I think developers have been like conditioned to think about things in a very constrained way so far, since it's been so EVM centric. But it doesn't really take too much when you kind of like show them what's possible, and they're like, oh yeah, I would love to just use like all these other building blocks that I could just pull in that makes my life easier. So I think at least for like the near to medium term, I see that as like a very clear kind of developer differentiation. Over time, if we're going to talk about like just the commoditization of like all this stuff because it's open source software, I mean, I don't know. I think like there's only so much moat in like software. You just have to be like, you have to react quickly, and you have to really understand who your sometimes evolving customer is, and that's really all you could do.
Yeah, got it. Interesting question for you, Liz. When it comes to like adding these like interoperabilities, like ZK, or like in your case, you did this project with TEs with flashbots. How do you how do you talk to your user base, which is maybe not like they don't understand how TE works, or like they don't like flashbots, obviously like a very high level organization. Like how do you communicate like these improvements to them in a way that like translates into the, oh, I get this, this is gonna benefit my experience because of this and this. Like how do you communicate these pretty complex concepts sometimes to let's say a newbie in your community, I guess?
Yeah, so not only did we do the TE project with Flashbots, we've actually launched this collector insight product with Lagrange using their ZK coprocessor. But at the end of the day, I think the answer is very simple. If you think about Web 2, a user of TikTok or Instagram or whatever, they have no idea what the tech stack is, and it doesn't matter to them. What matters is that there's a good product. And I think with great strides that have been made on the infrastructure side, we're able to get to the point where we have the ability to create great products for end consumers that have excellent value propositions, like privacy and scalability and so on and so forth, without having to articulate to them that they have to use a product because of the tech.
Got it. Question for Altan, and maybe do you want to comment on that? Or?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, this is very important because you mentioned about Amazon and Google and the other ones. Obviously, use them at the back end, but they don't give you a promise that they're gonna do the things that they're gonna do. And this is like, one example. I was just on Instagram yesterday. There was this one girl. He has like 150K followers on Instagram, and she was complaining about losing access to Instagram for like the last 2-3 weeks. And she built a community there. She got stuck there, and which you see with like EVM and the other ones, right? You build something, you get stuck there. So how do you build these structures of making that promise and make sure that you run that promise? And that's where like we think restaking is very cool, because it's you can kind of say that you can slash people if they do certain things. So that's why I'm excited about like taking stuff outside of this ecosystem and applying those like service agreements and others that you can build and back that up with restaking. So I'm quite excited about that. I just want to build on top of this.
Nice, thank you. Maybe on this, like you mentioned Google and like these other traditional companies, like do you think as an industry we are not addressing sort of like the enterprises who want to participate in blockchain? Like how do you, or maybe even how do we get them on chain? Because the end goal is like we want everybody on chain, including the most traditional business you can think of.
Well, they are on chain, right? So most of the AWS and Google run the everything that we do today. The way to get them there is like obviously containerizing some of the things that we do and then putting them to marketplaces like GCP and others, and they can just run that one. I think like the reason why we pushed towards EigenLayer is actually a perfect example. Is like you can containerize some of the logic that we do, push it there, and then people can take it. And obviously, even you can think about like payments as a way to kind of back those up. But I think even making those containers and being able to deploy them as some like AVS, which would make sense in the future. So that's how I see it. But like they are here already, and they're actually making a lot of money off of us too as a validator. So
Got it. Maybe Matt, maybe your take on bringing actual enterprises to run part of their operations on Arbitrum. Like, have you thought about this? Are you guys talking to companies who are interested? I'm just very curious on how you look about like bringing these like very traditional Web 2 companies into Web 3.
Yeah, I can comment on. So the big tech companies, I mean, this is a recorded presentation, so I have a lot of thoughts on why migration of traditional, maybe you could think of internet companies moving on to distributed technology is fundamentally not a great value proposition for them. It's a value leak. So there's not a strong incentive. You mentioned they're making money. Why should they change their position, right? But if you look at traditional finance, then you start to have real value propositions for them. I mentioned earlier we're starting to see really interesting changes here. One of the companies we work with, Franklin Templeton, among many other institutions that hold a lot of assets on behalf of clients, they put out a report, and honestly, we didn't even hear about this until they made it public. They were using, I believe, kind of a third-party service provider to settle trades. So for 50,000 trades, it was costing them $50,000, around $1 a trade. That's insane, right? On chain, it doesn't cost that much. And they said, okay, the delta was from 50 grand to about $1.50 for 50,000 transactions. So if you are a legacy institution and you can save $49,998.50, that's a great value proposition. And so I think for us, focusing on reducing the cost of transactions when you have a bunch of intermediaries. I hate to be like, this is what blockchains are, but there's so many businesses that only now are evaluating that thesis because the technology is scalable enough and honestly mature enough, right? You have layer 2s and layer 1s that have actually been out in the market for 5 to 10 years. And for a lot of these companies, they don't even look at something as an option until it has demonstrated maturity in terms of just time. So that's how we think about it.
Go ahead, Dino.
So I love how that's the huge. Oh my God. So I think all these approaches, like I think trying to take blockchains to like make it more appealing to enterprises is like good, but I think it's potentially not the way that like most of them ape in. Like I think that you kind of have to do it indirectly. Like I think, okay, it's not black or white. Like realistically, like you guys are doing great. Like everyone's doing great work towards this directly. But I could see a scenario where like we start with the consumer side of things and just like get so many people and so much capital like on chain that the enterprises just kind of like have to ape in to compete with like a more like, you know, seamless global market to tap into. You know what I mean? Like, so it's just like, oh wow, my competitor dipped into this thing and has like a bigger market than I do for whatever particular use case. Now it's like, now I feel the pressure.
Yeah, I mean, a good example is Kraken, right? They're launching their own chain. They saw the success of Base, and I mean, still in the crypto industry, but it does show, I mean, especially if you look at Coinbase's earning reports, the amount of money they're printing with Base is insane. Yeah. I'm pretty sure other traditional companies are probably looking at that, thinking about that.
Here's a question, like maybe this is controversial, but is it good that centralized exchanges are launching L2s? Like, because you actually own the whole stack, right? Is that something that like we should strive for? Obviously, this is maybe there's people that work at Coinbase, but like is that a good thing for the industry?
That's a great question, and I mean, I think the jury is still out, but you got to think about, I mean, and this is what you guys were mentioning about developers, right? Like, they want to have access to users, right? And maybe as a question to you guys, like, with the amount of chains, the amount of products, the amount of things, like, the interoperability, I don't know how to say this word, but you know what I'm saying. It becomes extremely, like, hard, maybe even for a developer to build an app and reach people everywhere. Like, how do you have to have so many integrations. I'm just very curious how you guys think about that from the developer perspective. Like, how do you build something that is ubiquitous on blockchains everywhere?
Yeah, I can start talking about this. So I think the reason why, so I used to work at Near. The reason why I started Near was because of obviously WASM, because it was very great to build on WASM. But then the interoperability at the time, like 2021, 2022. There were like some bridges, like even if you go to 2020, like there were no bridges, like people would just go in there and like get stuck. Now we're like in a place where like you can build a map of these things, right? Like, people are building, like I know the Rollup has built stuff that's called chain abstracted map. Like I think we're at a place where you can actually like, let's say Dino launches an L2 and quickly there's like 10 providers for Dino to use to connect to other blockchains. And that's like, we didn't have that before. So I don't think it's like, it used to be a problem that we talked about it a lot, but like, if you're launching something on interoperability, you need to be very, very specific to the specific market. And this is why we're building Nuff protocol to be very, very like, hey, this is only for restaking. Like, there's no other usage. We're gonna do this for anything else, right? So I think like, yes, but even if you launch something on Arbitrum, you can easily get connected to other things. Except maybe you can talk about the AltLayer and other stuff. But there's a war there that's going on. But yeah, quite excited about it.
I don't know about this war. Actually, just a comment on the question you asked earlier, because I think it's interesting. You know, I think when I first joined it, someone once described crypto to me as an onion. It's like you peel it back and there's always more layers. I always thought that was funny. But kind of this notion of like, we saw the onion and all the layers at the beginning, or a lot of us did when we first joined the industry. And you start to see big centralized players move in, and it can feel disappointing sometimes. But maybe just to push back, like obviously personally I feel differently, but from a structural perspective in kind of growing the market, I would argue that a centralized exchange having a chain is better than having a private database, right? You can at least spin up a node and verify it. You might not be able to challenge it or do anything because it could be whitelisted, but at least it's viewable, right, in a way that it wasn't before. So it's good for users, I would say, on the aggregate that we are moving the needle a little bit over from what is just this dramatically centralized financial world that we operate in. I would say in terms of the interoperability point, it's hard. There's a lot of things. There's probably two really, really important things that are important to us from general interoperability, and this might change the framing that we think about it in kind of like the Twitterverse, but there's asset transfer between chains. I mentioned people want sovereignty, centralized exchanges want their own chain. Okay, you still need to be able to send the asset there, right? So making sure that developers, projects, users have access to not only different types of fast bridges or fast messaging protocols with different security trade-offs, but know what those trade-offs are, that's really important, that's crucial, and that's something that we care a lot about. And there's a lot of these new token standards, these interfaces for calling these solver networks popping up. Enabling that journey, choice, really important. The second thing is actually kind of flipping interoperability on its head from that previous notion I'm talking about, is just, well, making sure that everybody can access everything they need to in the same chain, in the same environment, in the same sharded environment. And that's why we're excited about WASM, right? We have a technology called Stylus, which allows you to have WASM-based programs interoperate with Solidity-based programs in the same chain. And for us, like, that's a huge unlock. Teams are super excited about that. It's obviously more efficient, as I'm sure you guys are really aware of. But it's scaling the environment and also allowing the environments to talk to each other. That obviously is a high-level summary, but yeah.
Seems we got a bunch of WASM maxis on this stage, including me. Okay, so I think you mentioned, a couple times, I know you guys are building on EigenLayer, and you mentioned Shriram, and I think those folks' mental model around kind of like the cloud, almost like making the crypto turn into like a cloud experience, I think is right and will play out in due time. And my background before crypto was in cloud, and I built developer tools, infrastructure, and honestly, it seems right now that there's so many solutions, things aren't interconnected, what to do, how developers don't want to think about all this stuff. I get that, but in reality, it's that gets solved. I think that gets solved over time. There will be more and more systems like Nuffle that come in and they solve this problem and they connect nicely with kind of a bunch of the other, I'll say consolidated into top 5 products in each category. The reality is there's usually only a certain window when it's fragmented and everybody, there's 10, 15, 20 solutions competing, and then some win and some lose, and then there's one market winner, and for each of those little components there's one market winner, a few that are maybe industry specific or whatever, certain type of developer specific or whatever, and then maybe a fast follower that's new and doing something radically different. But realistically, a given developer, I think in due time will have that kind of experience where it's all right, well, I need 5 to 10 different components to supplement my roll-up, for example, if you're building a roll-up, or an app if you're building an app. And now I'm looking at a space of 5 to 10, or let's just say 20 other solutions. And I think if you're building your whole business, if you're starting a company and you're building if your business is an app, you're gonna spend the time and think about those 5 to 20 different solutions that are all kind of the ones people use in the industry for your use case. So it seems messy right now, but I think it'll end up being pretty fine.
Over time, basically, we trend to the best solution.
Yeah, exactly. And those best solutions start to work better and better and better together.
Got it. Last question from me to you all. Do you think as an industry, we have to maybe change the way we talk to future users? Do you think maybe if you've been here for a long time, the community is built on nerd sniping. Do you think we need to sort of change the conversation so that we can basically reach people who don't understand maybe what WASM is, for example?
Well, in my view, no, because I think the way I see the landscape is that not everyone needs to be really in the technical details, right? The end users that we envision, they are probably completely unfamiliar with crypto. They might not even know that the application they're using has crypto at all. So, I think that, you have to think about like who exactly your target audience is. You know, if you are building an ecosystem that requires a lot of developers who are deeply ingrained in that kind of space, then of course. But yeah, I don't think it's a one size fits all kind of branding and messaging approach.
Yeah, I mean, I think about this in the curve, like how you think about it. I think a lot of folks are like in Ethereum, and you know, we've done the same mistakes at Near. It's just like we talk to a lot of the right curve folks, but those are not the main users. Like those are the developers that you definitely have to talk to, by the way, as you guys are. But then you also have to think about the left curve and some of the mid curve as well, right? Like why are these people using left curve? I mean, if you think about it, left curve is someone that comes in and is going to spend like a minute in your app, and they need to be figuring out what the hell they should be doing on your chain, on your app, whatever. So yeah, so think about this bell curve, or like the dumbbell analogy of like, let's talk to the left and right. But messaging, as you said, it's different to those folks, and need to be like, we shouldn't be talking left curve here, right? Versus some advertisements that we might be putting. So that's how I think about it.
Yeah, I think we actually need to talk more about the primitives that blockchains enable to regular people. I mean, I'm jaded because I'm from the States, and we just like, anyway. And I think a lot of people are frustrated, right? I mean, you're growing up in a world with a lot of people, a warming climate, and you're trying to make it. You're trying to provide for you and your family, and you realize that all these different things that you use, whether they be technology or, you know, teller interactions at a bank, are controlled by a group of people whom you have no influence over. And blockchains are fundamentally different than that. Obviously, some have different versions of the ilk that we might be used to, but they're better. They're better systems. And I think that we don't talk about that basic premise enough, which is that, you know, you have a wallet, it's your keys, it's your money, you can control it, and yeah, it's gonna take 80 to 100,000 people colluding to get in your way, which is a lot harder than a board of directors. And I think that if most people become aware of that, you will start to see trends in individual investors actually moving their money and wanting to trade on chain and wanting those tokenized assets that don't currently exist, right? That haven't been brought over from traditional exchanges. And
before I give it to Dino, I grew up in Turkey, so the TL, the Turkish lira, just went like, it was like the down graph, like a meme going down graph. So I'm quite excited about this, right? I think we're talking about always in our sort of technical communities, but I just wanted to bring up Jesse Pollack, who's been traveling all over the world and really telling our story. So like that's very important, and like going to these developing countries like Turkey, telling the story and why they need it. And I'll leave it to.
No, it's a fair point. I grew up in Brazil, so I know what it's like. 33% of the population there owns cryptocurrencies because, well, it's a pretty bad government, let's say.
Can I ask us a question, like related to this? We're building infrastructure products, like at the end of the day, like at its core. Like, do you think that? Okay, we're building infrastructure products. Do you think like infrastructure products will always have to like speak to end users?
No, I hope not. I mean, it depends on what it means. I think the one difference. Okay, I take that back. The analogy that was used a while back was always like you're watching Netflix, right? Netflix famously has like hilarious redundancy. They have like so many different mirrors of all of their data on all of the cloud platforms. But no user ever knows when they're watching Netflix that like the guys at, you know, AWS, Azure, and GCP are like holding all their data, right? And nobody goes on Netflix and they're like, sick, dude. This episode of Arcane's on AWS, bro.
And users aren't just like, expecting like AWS to like
totally
figure out Netflix users.
100%. But sorry. I guess the point I was trying to make, and I nerded out myself there, is that what's different with crypto is, say because of tokens, say because of the way that we talk to each other on these weird social media platforms, there is a community associated with the brand, right? Imagine if everyone who used Netflix was an owner of Netflix in some weird way. Maybe they own their their watching history data, or it's something else. I think because of that, the ecosystem actually does have to talk to new users, and the brands mean something different than we're used to in traditional.
Yeah, in a way, you have to evangelize a community. You have to create it. I am aware that we ran a bit over time. Apologies. So thank you guys for coming here and you guys also for listening. Yeah, we
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
It was fun.